Hi everyone, it's Danny. Okay, so this week we will make some repotting videos. I do have to repot some of my orchids. So today we're going to discuss about top 3 reasons why you always want to repot new orchids. Okay, so the first main reason why I always repot new orchids is bugs. I have found so many types of bugs in the new orchids media that I'm already freaked. I have found all sorts of bugs, from those tiny little bugs with a lot of feet that move really fast to all sorts of spiders and beetles and so on. And especially if you grow your orchids in the house, I don't think you want all those bugs to crawl out of the pot and onto your furniture and so on. Now, if you're not creeped out by all these bugs that are pretty harmless, let's say, then think about other things like snails, slugs, and mealy bugs. Many of my orchids actually came with tiny little snails, and the bad thing about them is they feed on new growth. Whether it's roots or new shoots, they absolutely love it. And so if you leave them be in your orchid pot, it can lead to dead orchids in no time, especially if the orchid you have is not in the best of shape. You do want the orchid to produce roots and sustain itself, and if there are any snails there, that's not going to happen, unfortunately. Also, mealybugs have a bad habit of making a sort of a nest in the root bowl. So you might treat the orchid on the surface, but the mealybugs will still appear because they have that nest inside the root bowl. So from this point of view, it's actually a very good idea to repot the orchid, disinfect it, wash it out, make sure there are no unwanted pests, and pot it in fresh new media that you know has no pests. Second main reason why you want to repot any new orchid is broken down media. You don't know how long an orchid has been sitting in that media, and you don't know if the media is still good to go. And in many cases, the orchids you will buy have spent about a year or two in that media. And so it's already breaking down. Now, this is not good for any orchid you might have. Old media releases toxins by decomposition. Also, it becomes very acidic and can damage the root system. In most cases, the orchids you buy at stores have been in the same media for quite a while. So it's always a good idea to replace it with fresh new media and give the orchid a fresh start. If you leave the orchid in a bad media for too long, you're gonna have yourself a serious case of rotten roots, and that sets back any orchid. You can actually feel a broken down media when you water the orchid. If after watering you feel a very funky smell, something like degrading or decomposing material, and also fungus smell, if you know how that smells, mushroom smell, that's a sign that the media is not in tip-top condition, and it would be wise to actually repot the orchid so you avoid some damaged roots. This is especially important for the new roots that will come from your orchid. If they don't have a proper media to develop in, the root tips might actually burn, and you will have yourself a very staling and non-vigorous orchid. And the third main reason is inappropriate media and inappropriate pots. In many cases, you will find orchids potted in pure sphagnum moss or peat moss. And if you're a beginner, they can be quite tricky to manage, especially if they don't have a proper pot either. Now, sphagnum moss and peat moss retain a lot of water. So you might be tricked into thinking that watering once a week is a good thing, like everybody suggests, when in fact the media can stay moist for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, especially if it does not have a pot with some proper ventilation holes or slits. So according to your environment and your preferences, it's a good idea to change the orchid into a more appropriate media. If you like to use a combination of sphagnum moss and bark, or simply bark, or whatever other media you feel comfortable with, this is what you should be using with your new orchids, even if they're potted in a totally different media. Also, you might want to make additional side holes for more ventilation. This is especially good for orchids that do require more moisture but ventilation at the same time. So by repotting a new orchid, you can actually switch the media to your preferred one, and also switch the pot. Maybe you would like to see the roots and you would like to use a clear plastic pot. You can make ventilation holes. So anyway, customize everything to your needs and your environment, and in the long run, this is a good thing for the orchid. Inappropriate media can mean more than rotten roots, actually. Let's take, for example, sphagnum moss. Because it retains so much water and it actually wicks water, it basically is moist all around. It will release some moisture in the vicinity of the orchid's base. If you don't have a lot of ventilation in your house, this moisture can actually lead to some stem rot, or worse, some crown rot, depending on your orchid. So be careful what media you're choosing. Always try to go for something you've already worked with. If you don't have experience, go for bark. I believe this is the safest one you can use. Also, it retains a little bit of moisture, so you won't have to water every day, but it is ventilated enough to provide aeration to the root system. Also, it does not stay too wet at the top, so it will not release as much moisture as to create some problems with the stem and so on. So as you can see, inappropriate media can actually lead to a lot of bad things. Also, take into consideration that the old media might not be what it appears to be. In many cases, you will find orchids that have a sphagnum moss ball right at the root system, and all around it can have bark. So when you water it, you might think, well, the orchid is dry because the bark is dry, but in the middle it can be very, very moist. That again can lead to some problems. In some cases, you can find slow release fertilizer or those fertilizer sticks inside, and maybe you don't want that because you would like to fertilize with your own thing. Or maybe you can over-fertilize because you have no idea that inside the pot you can find those fertilizer sticks, and so on. The list can actually continue. So the best advice that I can give you is to always repot new orchids no matter what. If you feel that the media is completely broken down and at this point dangerous, you should repot no matter if the orchid has flowers or bud or so on, because in the long run you're interested in the well-being of the plant. If the media seems to be quite okay, it doesn't smell very, very bad, it does not have all sorts of creepy crawly things on top, you can actually enjoy the blooms for a few days or even a few weeks, but then do repot your orchid in an appropriate media and of course an appropriate pot. This on the long run will only benefit the orchid. As far as timing goes, well, you know that orchids are induced into blooming in nurseries, so you cannot really say I will only repot in the springtime. You can actually repot whenever you want. In some cases, the orchid will be set back a little bit, maybe due to health issues or so on, but in many cases in the long run it will be better. You just have to have patience. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video and it was helpful to you. As I told you, I will make some repotting videos because I do have some new orchids this week. So thank you for joining. If you want to see those videos and other videos regarding orchids, you can subscribe to my channel and stay up to date. You can leave me questions or suggestions in the comments below and I'll get back to you. And if you just want to stay in touch with me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. You have all the links in the description. I'll see you next time. Bye!